Former diplomat Shiv Shankar Mukherjee joins us in the studio to basically put in overall perspective the significance of Prime Minister Modi's visit to South Africa. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Overall deliverables that we are looking at, considering Prime Minister Modi has reinforced or perhaps emphasized too much also on the historical and cultural ties that India shares with South Africa, the Mahatma Gandhi Connect and much more. So in that sense of term, how significant is this trip in terms of energizing in India and South Africa ties?
Well, at the level of the Prime Minister, as the head of government, certainly this visit is of enormous importance. It is absolutely true that we have very, very strong historical ties with South Africa. We were the strongest supporters internationally of the fight for liberation. We were the first to take the question of apartheid to the United Nations even before our own independence in 1946, when there was a provisional government in India, and so on. I mean, this goes way back. There is, of course, the fact that Mahatma Gandhi began his struggle against the forces of oppression and racism and developed his philosophy of satyagraha in South Africa.
Prime Minister will be retracing some of those historical footprints. He'll be visiting the railway station there.
Well, that is the second time an Indian leader is doing it, and I can claim some credit for that, because when President Abdul Kalam visited, it was my idea and my Consul General in Durban to put together this trip, which began in Durban, right opposite right from the point where Gandhiji boarded the train that took him to Pietermaritzburg. And in fact, by coincidence, the building that stands exactly where the old railway station used to be is now the Indian Consulate General. It's still called the station building. We took that train, which was an exact copy of the train that Gandhiji took.
Okay.
We stopped it in Pietermaritzburg at exactly the spot that Gandhiji was thrown out. It was a very moving moment, and we took the president into the room where Gandhiji spent the night, where he, you know, the whole Gandhi phenomenon started that night in that little room. Okay. And there's a very moving speech which Gopal Gandhi, who was his grandson, who was High Commissioner there later, said that was an occasion when Gandhiji was thrown off the train, but he was not just thrown off the train. It was then that Gandhi was launched. Well, it's a wonderful remembrance and an assertion of the very strong ties we bear with the connection that we have with the Mahatma and South Africa. But apart from that, the economic ties that we have with South Africa are exceptionally important. The ties have various dimensions. The direct bilateral economic ties. In fact, South Africa is a master of certain technologies which are at par or even beyond some Western countries. The other dimension is that South Africa is one of the emerging economic countries, and we are grouped with them in IPSA, the India, Brazil, South Africa grouping, and BRICS.
BRICS, yes.
Additionally, South Africa is probably one of the most influential members, by far the largest economy in sub-Saharan Africa, which gives it a very strong voice in Africa. So on all these grounds, our relationship with South Africa, on bilateral grounds, on regional grounds, continental grounds, and internationally, is, as you can see, is of exceptional importance.
In fact, when last year New Delhi hosted Africa heads of the state,
That's right.
Today, you know, in a way, if you look at it, continuation of what we started then last year with the African heads of the states, and today Prime Minister Modi having one-on-one with Jacob Zuma.
Well, absolutely. In fact, your question raises a very, very important issue. The Delhi summit, the India-Africa summit, was the third one. The first one, and this is beyond even what the US and Japan and China achieved, where every single African nation was represented, and the vast majority of them represented at the level of heads of state or heads of government. Now this follow-up by the Prime Minister in these four important African nations, immediately preceded by our President going to Namibia, Ghana, and I think the Ivory Coast, immediately preceding that, our Vice President visiting North Africa,
Yes.
shows that message that many analysts, many foreign policy observers have been saying, that we do certain good things at very high levels and then we don't sustain it. Implementation is slow. It's very glacial. So this, to me, is something very encouraging. It shows that the government of India is not just content with having a very successful summit, but is actually doing the follow-up necessary at the highest possible level. And my only hope is that having done this at the senior-most government level, at the level of the President, Vice President and the Prime Minister, that the rest of the government, the operational part, the embassies, the Ministry of External Affairs, all our other ministries will follow up with the same energy that our political leaders are showing.
Well, India happens to be South Africa's sixth largest trading partner. In that sense of terms, there's a lot of talk going on. This particular visit is also aimed at balancing China's business interests in South Africa. Now, India also is slowly, or would perhaps slowly gain grounds if we look at the economic variables on the table.
You know, that is a subject that has led to a flood of literature, India and China in Africa. In fact, there are books that are called exactly that, India and China in Africa. These are two Asian giants that are making very, very strong strides in Africa. And of course, China's investment and trade with Africa are way ahead of India's. I personally, having served there for, more than a decade in Africa, I would say we should not base our policy, and I'm pretty confident that our government is not, base our policy on a kind of catch-up with China syndrome. We have our role, we have our past and present, and we have our aspirations for the future with Africa. We have certain endowments, we have certain advantages. We should capitalize all them. We should deal with each country on its own merit, with whatever we can offer and whatever is to our mutual advantage. And when we do that, we will find that this whole business of catch up with China is not really all that important or all that necessary. So I doubt if Prime Minister Modi is concentrating on identifying what China is doing and saying, okay, let's do better than this. We already have a foundation of a lot of things that we have done with African countries, and we should build on them. We should build on them with greater efficiency. We have done many things on which we haven't got the goodwill we deserve, because after having committed to do it, we've done it slowly, we've done it with a lot of glitches and a lot of bureaucracy. And so by the time it gets done, the goodwill has just, evaporated away. So those are things that are more important than simply trying to focus on a more successful China. China's a much larger economy. It's 5 times the size of ours.
Okay. Do you think now this trip is also going to get a little focus perhaps back on the energy, the way we saw Prime Minister personally taking up the energy issue personally with Switzerland, US, as well as Mexico, here in, although South Africa, in terms of building that consensus, the required consensus from South Africa?
Well, you're right. I mean, look, there are two opinions on India's, among analysts and those of us who've been involved in foreign policy. There are two opinions on our NSG aspirations. I mean, there is a feeling that we've staked too much and gone too far in trying to become members of the NSG, because we already have a commercial waiver. We don't need to be a member to trade in nuclear material for peaceful purposes. However, there is absolutely no doubt that Prime Minister Modi and his government have made it an extremely important objective.
Yes.
To that extent, I'm absolutely positive that he will have discussed it with the South African president and his cabinet. Because according to reports, I'm not really absolutely in the personal know of things, but according to reports, South Africa did raise certain procedural concerns at the Seoul meeting.
Yes.
So if that is so, going by the recent past record of the Prime Minister going to Switzerland and Mexico to drum up support, I'm absolutely positive he would have discussed this as well.
Whether those procedural concerns raised by South Africa earlier, maybe they would be ironed out or not.
Well, that would be the attempt.
Let's try and talk to our correspondent who joins us from Pretoria, Sudhir Yadav, who is, of course, accompanying Prime Minister on this particular visit. Sudhir, now we are expecting the signing of agreements and joint Prasar in a while from now. What are you picking up in terms of what has transpired in the delegation level talks and the key important agreements that are slated to be signed?
बिल्कुल सिकल, देखिए आज जिस तरह से सेरेमोनियल रिसेप्शन रहा बहुत बढ़िया रहा, और दूसरी सबसे ज़रूरी चीज़ है जो दोनों देशों के बीच जो रिश्ते हैं बहुत पुराने हैं, जिनमें गर्माहट बहुत ज्यादा, और अभी की जैसी बात की कि जितने भी अभी तमाम जो अंतर्राष्ट्रीय मुद्दे उनके मद्देनजर बहुत ज्यादा अहम माना जा रहा है, जैसा कि अभी थोड़ी देर पहले डिस्कशन हुआ था, उन सब चीजों के मद्देनजर उसके बाद से जो प्रधानमंत्री की प्रेसिडेंट जेकब जुमा के साथ जो 1-to-1 मीटिंग हुई है, उसमें जाहिर तौर पे काफी एक बेहतर अंडरस्टैंडिंग बनी है। और उसके बाद से तमाम जो कल्चर की बात करें, साइंस एंड टेक्नोलॉजी की बात करें, इन्वायरमेंट की क्षेत्र की बारे में बात करें, इवन पावर सेक्टर की बात करें, एनर्जी जरूरतों के लिहाज से, तो ये सारे मुद्दे बहुत जरूरी चीजें हैं जिनके बीच में आम सहमति बन सकती है, और जो आपसी सहमति बन सकती है। सबसे खास बात सकल जो कही कि तमाम अंतर्राष्ट्रीय मुद्दों पे दोनों देश साझा तौर पे काम कर रहे हैं, तो दोनों में एक आपसी सहमति बनेगी और साथ में आगे साझा और बेहतर तरीके से बढ़ सकते हैं। इन चीजों पे खास तौर पे और ज्यादा सहमति बन सकती है।
All right, Sudhir, as of now, thank you very much. We'll keep getting back to you as and when the agreements will be signed. As of now, thanks for joining. South Africa, in fact, besides the energy issue, South Africa has always been very vocal about the UNSC membership, permanent membership.
Yes.
And in that sense of term, it also becomes India's natural ally. In that, how do you see both these nations, at least when the Prime Minister, again, he's there in South Africa, we're discussing a lot of things with Jacob Zuma, this is also going to come up? In fact, stronger ties with South Africa.
Well, it will come up, but you know that's not going to be an easy thing. Not because the support from South Africa is not forthcoming. It is forthcoming. South Africa is fully on board as far as India's credentials are concerned, and the need for reform of the Security Council to reflect the present day planet. The point is, if you followed the debate, the whole question of reform of the Security Council boils down to expanding it so that it now is more inclusive in terms of representation of developing countries, and more inclusive geographically. At the moment, it's China, the US, and Europe. If you include Russia in the Europe, there is no representation from Latin America, there is no representation from Africa. And that is part of the demand for reform. Now, both these are in a tangle, because in Africa, South Africa claims the right to represent Africa because it's by far the largest economy, the richest country, and in terms of sheer size and economic strength, and its past, it feels it is a natural candidate to be the Africa's representative. Whereas Nigeria feels it is the country with the largest population, and that Nigeria should be the representative. And this is creating a major problem, and then there's a third contender, Egypt, because although it's a West Asian country, it's also an African country, and Egypt, I've served as ambassador there, will never let go an opportunity to be part of or lead any organization that it can remotely think of. So you have a situation within Africa which is not very clear. In fact, there's been talk of a rotating representation with two countries in Africa rotating their representation in the Security Council. So we have a very confused situation in Africa on that score. We have a very confused situation in Latin America and that's go with Brazil and Argentina.
Their domestic politics and their domestic front.
competing countries.
Right.
So, but the question of their supporting India is very much something that has already been stated by them. But as I said, if you look at the overall picture, this whole business of becoming a permanent member of the Security Council, as far as India is concerned, is a mirage. It's not going to happen. Not
Right,
with the veto.
Getting back our focus to what all is expected in this particular visit, from their perspective, from their point of view.
Right.
We're talking about South Africa and Prime Minister Modi's huge international popularity. Now, as far as the African nations' outreach is concerned, their interests in our investments, all of that. So, how do you put that in perspective?
Yes, it is. And in fact, if you've served there, the Africans have learned their lessons. They are not now looking for quick fixes. I have served all over Southern Africa, and the old story of Africans, sort of looking at everything that glitters, whether or not it's appropriate for their country, is really in the past. They are looking to India as a source of education.
Okay.
The number of African applicants to Delhi University is 5 times more than last year, in spite of those racist attacks on Africans that have hit the press, which are extremely unfortunate, and we should do everything we can to stop that. But as a source of education, as a source of appropriate technology, as a source of investment, interaction with India in terms of institution building, that is an area where we are actually ahead of China in vocational training, in institution building, in various sectors. We've already done a lot. They look to us now with modern day technology such as IT. I mean, recently at the Africa Summit, or just after the Africa Summit, African heads of state and government have asked for satellite connections between capitals in southern Africa so that they can talk securely to each other. Airtel is already there. During President Kalam's visit, he had asked for, and we had implemented an optic fiber connection between all 54 countries amongst themselves and with India. So you have a whole mix of sectors, such as in the economic area particularly, in terms of transfer of technology, investment in specific industries, especially today information and communication technology, and the concept of the demand for education, linked to also medical education and medical facilities in India. There are tens of thousands of Africans from various countries in Africa who are already arriving in India for medical treatment. So the canvas is extremely wide. Plus, internationally, let's not forget 2 things. One is that Africa is 54 countries, and when we need support internationally in terms of numbers in the United Nations or elsewhere, then Africa looms large on our horizon. Fortunately, we have friendly or very friendly relations with all African countries. But here I would enter a caveat, which is what my first ambassador used to tell me, that we should make friends before we need them.
Okay.
We should not neglect our friends and then rush to them only when we need them.
All right. Prime Minister Modi will be, in fact, interacting with the Indian diaspora at Johannesburg,
That's right.
and then he will also proceed to Durban. The outreach in that sense of term, as far as Indians living there in this part of the continent is concerned, I'm talking about South Africa. Why? Because the deep-rooted ties that we share, whether
Yes.
you're talking about historical, cultural footprints of India, Indian civilization, Gandhi's connect and all of that. So there has to be that emotional
yes,
connect
I mean,
also.
there's no doubt about it. It has the Indian community in South Africa is touching 1.5 million people. And I think, and I can say this without fear of contradiction, the Indian community in South Africa, in terms of its involvement in the liberation struggle, has an extremely proud history. In fact, they have a rather, I should not arrogant, but a rather proud attitude in which many of them told me that, the Indian community in other African countries also played a part in the liberation of those countries, but they just bankrolled the struggle. We were in the struggle, which is a fact. Even Mandela refers to it in his autobiography, including the Indian housewives, not just the leaders on the streets. There is that connection between Mandela's first cabinet had such a large number of Indian community people in it, Indian origin people in it, that there were editorials in the press that Madiba has a disproportionate number of Indians in his cabinet. There were comrades of his who spent their lifetime in jail with him, people like Ahmed Kathrada and so on. So this is a very proud community. They are South Africans. They're proud of their being South Africans and having taken part in the liberation struggle, including their children.
And South Africans' fondness for
And
Mahatma Gandhi?
Pardon?
And South Africans' fondness for Mahatma Gandhi?
Well, let me say this with all emphasis. Mahatma Gandhi in South Africa and his memory is more alive in South Africa than in India.
In fact,
and I can testify to that. Because if you I can give you a dozen instances. To give you just one instance, in the 2002 election, there was a controversy in Durban that when the ANC started using Gandhi's portrait on walls, below which they had an election slogan, who would he have voted for? Meaning, of course, he'd have voted for the ANC. And the opposition party, which was mainly white, objected, saying that Gandhi belongs to the whole of South Africa and to the whole of the world, so
In
they
fact,
can't
that reminds me, in one of the interviews given to DD News a few years back, Nobel laureate Sirleaf, Nigeria, I think former
Yes.
Liberian president, she
Right.
said that he first belonged to us than to India.
Well, the South
Minister
Africans have a saying. They're
Yes.
saying, you gave us a lawyer called Mohandas Gandhi.
Yeah.
We gave you the Mahatma.
And so that goes without saying that Prime Minister Modi's this visit to South Africa is only going to take that fondness to next level as far as the
Well,
diplomatic
yes,
ties
but
between
you
the two
know,
countries are concerned.
there's a cautionary note. There is that chapter, the Gandhi's connection with South Africa, his 22 years in South Africa, and all that it meant to India, to South Africa, and to the world. That is a wonderful chapter in history.
Right, sir.
But in today's when we are conducting diplomacy, I don't think we should simply base all our interaction on the basis of our glorious past connections. It is time to get professional. It is time to match aspirations with the present day aspirations of the people.
Right, sir. And we wrap up this discussion here.